now? Okay,
yes.
Thank you. And within one of the work packages of this project, we were writing the research report, which is called Optimizing the European Union Circular Economy for Better Recycling Possibilities for More Effective Policies and Business. And we conducted not so many, but as the first presenters, but 7 semi-structured anonymous interviews with policymakers, public authorities, industries, and non-government experts. And they were, and also 2 from research institutions and universities. And they were not only from Finland, but from Europe, for example, transport and environment. And like our preliminary idea was to analyze how policy, industrial behavior, technological development, and materials flow interact over the time till 2050, and how these interactions influence the Europe's ability to secure secondary raw materials through effective EV battery recycling. We are focusing on recycling because I will show a little bit later that there are research studies of our colleagues that are focusing on repurposing. And from the interviews and even before, we were supporting our intuition about the behavior of the system. We understood that large volumes of end-of-life EV batteries, they will enter the market around between 2033 and 2035. Because their lifespan is about 10-15 years, and as they were placed on the market, the majority of them, the biggest share was placed on the market in the early 2020s, so we will see how the system is going to behave in between 2033 and 2035. And also what the majority of our interviewees stated, that Europe still, despite the fact that we have a quite good regulation, Europe still loses a substantial share of its potential secondary raw material, so-called black mass. There is still existing backdoor for this black mass. It is still exported to China and South Korea. However, while we were writing this research report, it's a good news that from September 2026, European Union is restricting, depending on classification of this black mass, restricting the exporting of this black mass. So this fact is hindering the development of this closed-loop European battery value chain and weakening strategic autonomy. What we see, I have already mentioned that we have quite good regulation, and there is mention here that in 2027 will be fully implemented battery passports. Now it's becoming possible to track these batteries and to see whether they are not going from the European Union and whether it is possible to recycle them. And also interesting statistics from International Council on Clean Transportation. They analyzed Nordic countries that are leading Europe's transition to electric vehicles. 25% of passenger transport in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland is represented by plug-in, hybrid, and electric vehicles. And here is the statistics from Finland and here from Sweden. I thought that it can be interesting. And we can see that I don't like the phrase policy interventions, but policy initiatives and policy incentives. They are really shifting the growth of the number of electric vehicles. So as far as there was stricter CO2 targets for vehicle manufacturers, then we see a growth in these dynamics. So we have analyzed what our colleagues, what models our colleagues developed, and these 2 first ones were developed by VTT Center, which was one of the VTT Technical Research Center, that was one of the partners in government project. They have very interesting case, like in-house system dynamics research group that teach each other. They have professor who, based on Vensim, teaches their researchers to build models. But they are very interestingly they are modeling lithium, and also there are existing other publications of other critical raw materials. And they showed in their models that repurposing and remanufacturing can reduce cumulative lithium waste, for example, by up to 85% by 2050. But also very interesting, two publications by Seik and Koble. They were published within Circubat project. It was Swiss European Union project. They examined end-of-life battery management scenarios also under European Union battery regulations, but they were comparing repurposing and recycle pathways using system dynamics. And the second publication in 2025, at the end of 2025, they introduced some strategies to overcome so-called valley of death for second use EV batteries. And these strategies are collaboration between car manufacturers, recyclers, and also policy institutions, demand, price, and regulation. And we will see that in our system dynamics model, we also propose collaboration and regulation. This is this project, and very interestingly, that it was founded by the same during the same period as our project, Governmat, in Finland. From 2022 till 2025, it was Swiss European initiatives between Switzerland and the Technical University Delft in the Netherlands also contributed to this. And but they are focusing mainly on repurposing. Our project is focusing mainly on recycling. I'm sorry for maybe not a very nice view of this causal law diagram. I know that it is not a very good practice to present it as a running model, but we initially started with 4 stocks. They were electric cars in use, end-of-life materials, recycled material stock, and primary raw material reserves. And there are huge reinforcing loops that we identified. For example, these are primary raw materials is of constraint reinforcement. It links almost all our stocks from electric cars in use till recycled material supply. Also, a complex reinforcing loop is policy-driven sales reinforcement, and it also connects free stocks of our model. I will a little bit skip it, not to waste time, because I fully agree with the first presenter that while modeling, maybe only the model understands fully. And this is the overall view of EV battery circular economy dynamics model, and then I will try to discuss it. Our analysis showed that dominant feedback loops reveal a critical shift in system dynamics over the simulation period. The simulation period was from 2010 till 2050, moving from initial infrastructure challenges to long-term resource constraints. And there are 2 tipping points for the majority of the simulation, almost till the end, almost till 2048. The system is dominated by 2 balancing loops, however they are small, which govern the flow of and management of end-of-life materials and recycled material stock. And this indicates that the immediate and persistent challenge is managing the physical infrastructure and logistics of recycle. But after 2048, first reinforcing loop becomes dominant, and as I have showed, it is a complex one, a huge one, and it signals that resource scarcity eventually becomes the meaning limit on EV adoption, overriding the internal balancing mechanism of the recycling system.
Sorry, what is the infrastructure here?
Infrastructure meaning collecting infrastructure of these batteries and the logistics of these collected batteries to the recyclers,
Like
to
a
the recycling premises.
Okay, recycling infrastructure.
Yes, recycling infrastructure. And we have discussed the policy implications, like the first one can be prioritizing recycling infrastructure short to medium term, because we have a very, very good case in Finland. We have Kokkola industrial area. There are several recycling stations. It's some kind of a consortium. It's a big city where is located industrial park, and there are several factories that are battery recycling, and there is also research institute, innovation park there. And the second policy implication can be address resource scarcity directly. It can be a long-term policy implication. And the last can be manage growth or sustainability, some kind of a trade-off. Sorry. Maybe here. Is it here?
Oh no. Disaster. I guess you were here, right? No, that's Vanessa.
Yes, but it is
There, you were here. You good?
But well, now we see the presentation.
that.
Now?
Perfect. Now.
Okay. You're, yeah, I think it's just
something,
moved.
sorry.
It's fine, you're good.
And the policy incentives or policy initiatives might carefully manage EV sales, because during this time period, and the statistics show that EV sales were only growing, to ensure that demand does not outpace the ability of the recycling system to mature and the primary resource base to sustain this transition. Sorry, there are some text movements. In this paper draft, we have also discussed what can be the implications for different stakeholders, but while presenting our report on government project to different stakeholders, we had already preliminary discussion with them. It's very interesting for the recycling industry representatives. Sometimes they lack dialogue with car manufacturers and with policy makers, and we had in Kokkola like material event on critical raw materials, and the technical specialist engineers, they told that they really lack this communication, and we are not in this model taking into consideration consumers, but consumers may face also high initial EV cost if material efficiency standards or recycling mandates increase production complexity. There is some difficulty of implementation, like capital and time lag, because huge investments are needed to form this consortium or to coordinate industrial representatives with recyclers and with policy makers. But we can see, according to these two projects that were funded by the same period of time, and the second project, it was a flagship project, that policymakers, they're really interested in this topic and on the European Union level. And also political will of economic growth and international coordination exchange. We have also made a comparison of different car manufacturers who are already collaborating with battery producers, but the majority of battery producers, they come from China and South Korea. There are limitations. For example, it can be introduced to this model material aggregation. There is now the division between lithium, cobalt, and nickel, but now I am studying in Bergen. We had this course with Billy from IC Systems, and he showed how to divide. So now I know maybe I can further develop this model. Simplified policy response, exogenous technology, and also I have applied for one conference with justice, because Europe wants to be independent from material from material point of view, so this has to be just is not like exogenous factor, but endogenous. And lack of price dynamics, there is no price dynamics in this model. And that is why there are some perspectives for the future research, like dividing to lithium, cobalt, nickel, and the genizing recycling capacity, and modeling technological substitution, introducing alternative battery chemistries. Our interviews, all of our interviewees stated that there are existing technologies in hydrometallurgy and pyrometallurgy, and as far as our model is showing the dynamics till 2050, for sure the technology development will give this possibility of modeling technological substitution. And here is the conclusion. All our interviewees stated that it's really good, the implementation of battery passports and this strict European Union regulation concerning export of end-of-life used black mass and classification of this black mass. All of them stated that something has to be done before large volumes of end-of-life batteries enter the system after 2030. And that European battery transition shows that rapid growth of electric vehicles risk short-term shortages, while recycling provides long-term resilience if investments and policies are implemented early enough. And here is the map. Some of participants were asking, where's this University of Eastern It is in the middle of nowhere. Our linguistic scientists are very nicely playing with the words. We have two campuses in Kuopio, in Joensuu. In this government project, I was working in Joensuu campus. On my PhD, I'm working on Kuopio, and these two research centers that I showed in the first slide are located in Kuopio. Thank you very much. Here are the references.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. I was so dragged into the presentation, so I almost forgot my duty to present the discussant, Jonas Mortensson.
It's better for me to take this.
Yeah, I think you can stay here.
Yes, okay.
Just a second.
Thank you, Olga, for an interesting presentation and paper. And thanks, Anna, for asking me to do this and for setting this type of nice discussion setting for the conference. I think, it seems nice. Yeah.
Seems like it.
Let's see how it goes.
All depends on you now.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a second.
And I'm as was introduced here, my name is Jonas Mortensson. I'm here from KTH. I'm a professor in decision and control systems. My background is not really in system dynamics, but the mathematics of system dynamics models, I understand them well from my field of study. This maybe will shine out a little bit in the type of questions I will ask in the end. So discussant, it's almost a new word for me as well, but maybe some kind of opponent style of this. But the same problem, the arrows. How do you do? This arrow? Okay, there, too fast. There. No? Okay. So. Is it a lag? Okay, there.
Yeah, there's a lag.
There is a lag. Okay, so I mean, first I just would like to summarize my understanding of the paper. So the main contribution of this paper is, since we are at the SD conference, it's the SD modeling that I focus mainly on. I know there is a lot of material behind with interviews and sort of common understanding of the problem as well. That is sort of the basis of this model as well. So we should not forget that, of course, in this. But there is this system dynamics model that is capturing the growth of electric vehicles and how it is coupled with the battery material demand. So when you build the cars, you need the battery material, and this is being recycled. And when you recycle it, you can use it for the next car. If you don't have recycled material, you need to use virgin material, often imported from elsewhere to Europe.
From global south.
From global south, yes. So this
And
is sort of the
this
main.
increases dependency of European Union on.
Yes, yes. So this is the main sort of study object of this. The central argument of the paper is, as you say here, there is this sort of timing mismatch between the growth of the electric vehicles and the recycling infrastructure, and that. So that is lagging. So when we need new raw material for this, we will not have it, and we will continue to be dependent on the import from global south. Exactly, the capacity of the recycling industry is low, and the investments are lagging, and this is now a problem. And the idea or the purpose of this paper is to model and understand this, the dynamics of this. And this is done with this type of model. You said already that it's not a good idea to sort of focus too much on the model structure because no one understands it except you. But I try to understand it a little bit.
Thank you very much.
But just overview here, as I understand it, there is first a stock of the electric cars that is growing with its internal dynamics. That gives also rise to the installed battery in those vehicles, so it's described as its own stock, how much battery material are installed in these vehicles. At the end of their life, this battery is being sort of recycled or sort of dismounted from the vehicles and recycled, and you build up a recycled material stock that can be used when producing new vehicles. And then here are the primary raw material reserves that otherwise need to be used, or they will anyway need to be used. I mean, we will not totally be able to replace it with recycled material. But then the key point in this model is the policy feedbacks that are introduced here. So there is one policy feedback when the material, the primary raw material is used and becomes more scarce. Limited, maybe not only because it's depleted, maybe also for some other reasons, economical reasons, or that the import is limited, then it will have an effect on the recycling infrastructure, but it will also have an effect on the use of electric cars, or the growth of electric cars here. So those two sort of policy models from the use of raw material is what is sort of causing the dynamics that you are studying. That's sort of my understanding of this in general. And we'll come back in the end to some details in this model. And as already presented here, the main findings of this is that if you study this model, you can see sort of three phases in this. The first phase is sort of what already happened. So it's the past of the model. This is actually mainly based on historical data, if I understand correctly.
Yes,
so it's sort of
a
playing.
table function.
Yeah, so it's a table of what happened before. And then when we come to now, you move this into the sort of internal dynamics of the model, where you start to have this sort of the growth described, but it's also limited by the available material resources. So you have this sort of logistic growth. It sort of slows down because the resources are limited. And then in the end of the simulated period, there is some kind of collapse due to that the resources are depleted. We'll maybe discuss a little bit about what this collapse means here. Yeah, but anyway, so the growth sort of stops entirely, and so this is sort of the main modeling behavior that is produced here. And then the conclusions, the overall conclusions from this is that in order to compensate for this or sort of avoid this behavior, we would need more earlier and more coordinated investment in the recycling infrastructure, and also that you require more cross-industry collaboration to avoid this. That's sort of the main conclusion for avoiding these bottlenecks. And then also that I think you believe that recycling can provide increased resilience and so on for Europe if we are fast enough to build up this, but that we need the infrastructure governance and cooperation to do this before this critical time of 2035, when this becomes more obvious that we need it. So that's the summary of the paper. Oh, yeah. And then, okay, what do I think of the paper? Some strength of the first, we can say that this is sort of a work in progress paper, so it's not sort of finished, polished everything. So there are some details missing and so on. I will not go into those type of details here. But the strength of the paper, as I see it, is that it's a very systematic framing of this relevant problem for Europe. And it sort of captures this battery system, the adaptation of this system with the feedback loops and delays and these sort of tipping points. So it's a systematic way of describing this. There is a clear central insight that you take from the paper, that this exponential demand is balanced with this delayed recycling capacity. That's sort of the central point of this. And that this is also supported by the structure of this model. There is also some model validation presented in the paper that is at least lists several important steps in this. All of them are not in the current version I read, not shown in enough detail maybe, but it's claimed at least that these are done behind dimensional consistency checks, extreme conditions, loop dominance analysis. This you described quite well, but I was sort of lacking some kind of graph of this to understand it more properly. And some numerical sensitivity analysis. And it also has quite much of empirical real-world support. I think this shines out very. I mean, you have all these interviews and you have understanding of the European policy frameworks and how the market has evolved and so on. So it's sort of founded in a solid knowledge of the problem area. And then some friendly critique of this. Should be a critical friend, I think sometimes called her. And many of these things you already pointed out yourself in this, but there is sort of this missing pricing mechanism that I also agree that this is something that probably has a big impact on what happens here. That the scarcity of resources will increase the price. 1 minute. Yeah. And then this technology development that is not. It's sort of there is some this material intensity and battery sizes and so on that might adapt with technology that is not sort of present here. And also you mentioned this, the recycling capacity is just an exogenous input. It doesn't also sort of adopt with the state of the model. And I think there is a little bit of a weak external validity in this. You look at the model and see that it's sort of structurally works as you intend, but there is maybe you could find maybe some backcasting. You could look at how has material flows and recycling capacities grown in earlier in the markets or in other markets, and some things like this. And I also lack a bit of this parametric sensitivity analysis, where you look at the confidence bounds of the model. And you can run these sort of Monte Carlo simulations playing out different scenarios. I lack a little bit of that. Yes, this 1 minute. Now comes the
Then you can have the
okay, so now we have time for discussion. Right? Yeah. But I mean, so the first discussion is maybe if you want to comment a little bit on this, maybe because these ones you already mentioned in your presentation.
With pricing, technology development, yes, because I'm not a technology specialist. I have licentiate degree in economics from St. Petersburg, and it is recognized in Finland, but I am continuing my studies for the doctoral dissertation. But I have in my mind researcher from the University of Oulu who can share with me this battery size material intensity, and I can develop this model based on the information.
And I'm thinking here, what happens, for example, if solid-state batteries come and become very efficient and available? Maybe there are different chemical technologies that, I mean, all of these type of changes that are also forced by this. That is not really.
But all our interviewees told that technology exists and it is developing very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But that we are now forecasting till 2050, but maybe in 2033, when the big amount of end-of-life batteries come into the market, already exists something new. Yes, I absolutely agree that it is needed to be in the model. And yes, external validity. Yes, I was lacking of time because of the deadline. Yes, I know that I hadn't presented parametric sensitivity. Yes, and all this that is stated in the last bullet points paragraph. Fully agree with this. It has to be done till then. That is why this is the work in progress. Yes, it's the first draft.
Yes. Okay, and then I prepared a few sort of discussion points or questions, not too many, so I hope that after that you will you will come in as well. So my first question is was the system dynamics model really needed to reach the conclusions of the papers? And I can elaborate a little bit here. So I mean the core sort of structure of this model, sort of that the scarcity will appear, that the EV growth will be limited, and all of that is already sort of, you already argue for that when you frame the problem.
Yes.
So my question is little bit sort of, when you do this as a system dynamics model, does that really help you to understand better of the system, or is it actually just representing your intuition there? And yeah, let's see what I wrote here. Yeah, and another thing is also so the type of conclusions that you focus on in the end. Some of them, at least, in the abstract, you say that your model identifies the lack of cross-industry coordination. Mm-hmm. But cross-industry coordination is not really, there are no such representation in the model, what I can see. So the question is, do you actually get that from the model, or you get that from some kind of interpretation, and you put, it's more or less your background knowledge of the system that gives you those conclusions, and not really the model. So this is sort of the question.
Yes, concerning the first question, when I joined this project team, they were already writing this report, and they had made some kind of a table of variables. They understood that these variables are interconnected, but they wanted to see how strong is this connection between these, how strong is the influence, and it was like the request for system dynamic modeling, and when I told that I'm really interested in, I will try, so it was a match between their request and like my interest. Yes, and the system dynamics model mainly supported the initial intuition about how the system is going on. So what we have seen in system dynamics model supported the initial ideas, even before interviews. Interviews supported even more. Yes, I agree. I am mentioning that the model, I'm mentioning several times the lack of cross-industry coordination, and we have also understood it from the interviews. During the modeling process, while we were conducting these interviews, we understood from many interviewees that there is a lack of coordination. There is a lack of collaboration between them, and they really want this and need this. From my point of view, the model shows it, but maybe not enough. I need.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, when you, it seems like you are in the process of sort of developing this model further. So, I mean, when you introduce more aspects into this model, maybe sort of it will become also more useful for the understanding of this.
Heard maybe it was from System Dynamics or Sustainability Friday meeting that the more we develop, it's an iterative process. The more we develop, maybe we can get rid of some stocks and variables during this process.
Yeah, that's also okay. You expand, but you also prune away things. Absolutely. But okay, and then these are two. Actually, this is interesting because in my it's the first time I see them like this with the color. In my printed version, I only saw the this one. You should not. Yeah. Anyway, so this is good. This is the. Two of the graphs presented in the paper. It's sort of simulation of. So this is the electric cars in use. So sort of the growth of that, and this is the reserve of material that is sort of mean. And now I see also that you actually have the sort of the confidence bounds, because I only saw this and I saw no bounds. So that's perfect. So my question here, when I looked at this, you talked about the collapse before 2050.
2048.
Or 48, exactly. And when I looked at this graph, I saw just that, it continues, it levels off here. Why would this lead to this collapse? Here, it's only down 5%. So if I just project this here, it's down 10%. So, I mean, why would this be a collapse? I couldn't really sort of get together.
As far as I understood, electric cars in use, it's cumulative. So that that people bought maybe 5 years ago, and it's like get cumulative number of electric cars in use on the market, on the European market, and primary raw material reserve. It's also a question, because we were discussing within our government project with mining specialists, and they are telling that there are some new technologies in mining that maybe we are now predicting primary raw material collapse, but new technologies developed and
and I mean I can also see here that in some of these more aggressive scenarios, I mean you definitely have a much steeper decline in this, so you can reach. But I mean, if I just projected this one, it would not collapse. Maybe here it's another story. No.
Sorry, is this with or without the recycling?
This is without the recycling.
Okay.
It's primary raw materials. primary, not secondary.
But there is in the model there is recycling
There is
in
also-
it.
There are six
Yes.
confidence
Yeah, I
intervals.
only showed 2 of them. There are six graphs with also the stock of recycled material and installed material and so on presented as well. I just took 2 of them. So that's
Also, if if to consider technology advancement, it has to be in the model. And how to implement, I really don't know at the moment.
So can I ask you the question, what happens if you run your model a little bit further without doing anything else to the model? Does it come to some equilibrium, or does it does the market for electric vehicles really collapse, or does it reach a sort of steady state equilibrium?
It is not, the market of electric vehicles is not collapsing,
Right.
because there is a cumulative,
Yeah, but if you run on, does it reach the 100%
But
market share of electric vehicles and full recycling, or does it?
I was not trying to run this model later than 2070,
Okay.
so I don't know. Maybe I have to try.
Maybe
Thank you.
go for the sales, like if the sales decrease.
Mhm.
Because this
Or
is
new
like
cars or something. The inflow, just the inflow.
Yeah, inflow, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much. I have to try this.
Yeah. And so how are we on time now?
Yeah, I think that we should also.
Yeah, we have 6 more minutes.
6 more minutes. Yeah, we can let in some more.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think something is missing, or thing is missing is the big elephant in the room, not in this room, that room, which is the mining sector. So what are they doing to reinforce or to inhibit this recycling? Because I don't think they would like recycling, because recycle of existing materials, so they would be not supporting this. So how do you show it in the model that because they like to have new materials out, excavate as much as material, and even though it's going to be collapsing by 2040. But
In Europe, there are some reserves, but not a lot. The majority of critical raw materials are from the global south, and Europe wants to limit dependency on the critical raw materials. So from the one hand, global south is ready to supply. From the other side, Europe wants to be to increase autonomy.
But for example, in Norway, there is a deep mining going on, deep sea, deep ocean mining with the raw material, critical raw materials. So they say that, okay, we're going to make Europe independent of global south, and that's a big narrative going on. Of course, they are going to stop it by 2030, I think now, but after that, yeah.
And
there's
also
going to be a lot of materials coming from Norway in deep sea mining
and also the technology is developing of deep sea mining, and
Mhm.
maybe in several years we see some other situation. And in Finland also we have cobalt. We have some critical raw materials, but it's not enough for.
Thanks for your talk. My question, I know your study is focused on the EV market, so sorry if my question kind of blows up your project bounds, but I was wondering if instead of recycling, there's maybe some opportunity for reusing the EV batteries. Like, I know maybe it's hyped, but there's a lot of discussions right now about grid energy storage.
Repurposing.
Yeah, EV. So I was wondering, is it possible that maybe these end-of-life EV batteries aren't usable for transportation, but maybe it's actually more than enough for storage situations, and maybe that might help with the scarcity a little bit, or?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And Seika Klubi, and I think Klubi also, she graduated from the University of Bergen long ago. They are analyzing, they are making models on repurposing, yes, and they are showing that for some period of time, for 50, if I'm not mistaken, years, the scarcity, this end-of-life used electric vehicles batteries can be used as generators, electricity generators in household issues, yes. it works. You're right. And also our VTT Technological Research Center scientists, they are focusing on repurposing. They have several research papers, Seppa Lahdesmäki and Yuri Hansky. They are showing that it works for 15-20 years period of time. Repurposing.
Yeah, first of all, like for the question, please speak loud because the online people couldn't hear you. That's just it's a general comment. And then my question is like, what is the scope of your research? How is like the scope of the data? Is it like Finland or is it within the EU or?
It is European Union, and the interviewees were mainly from the European Union. Only industry representatives, 2 companies, they are Finland-based. But they are European companies, but they have factories in Finland. Yes, so the scope is European.
European. Okay, and then one more question, like, do you consider like a second use of the battery in the other industry, like you mentioned a little bit?
No, in this model,
Okay.
in this government report that we are writing, we are not considering the repurposing, we are only considering recycling.
Okay.
That is why I thought we know that these research studies exist,
Yeah, okay.
but we are focusing on recycling.
Can we get this back here? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Please continue. I just have one final bit from mine. But
the follow-up question and the final question.
With the repurposing, do you have demand for raw materials from other sectors in your model that could drive the price up?
From other sectors, no, only from electric vehicles in use.
Repurposing could reduce the demand from other sectors.
Yes.
There could be a feedback loop.
Yes. And I have seen it in Merla and Safe and Good. Their research papers.
Yeah. And then one final question.
exactly, and then just one final, I mean, we will take it later, I think. I mean, there was some confusion, I think, about the reinforcing and balancing loop in the description here. And now we don't have time to really dive into this, but I will be willing to do it later. But I mean, this part of the model where you have the resources and then you have these 2 different sort of policy mechanisms here. That becomes some kind of non-linear function here, and I think it's as you said, I don't really have time to go into it, but I mean, if you look at it here, depending on some values, you can get quite different behavior in this model, and you don't present how it's parameterized, and you draw some conclusions about whether it's reinforcing and balancing. So I have some detailed questions in here, but I think probably it's better if we sit down and look look at it.
Thank you very much. I have noticed yesterday while I was in a ferry from Turku to, I have noticed that something is there is some mistake here when I was making the slides.
Yeah.
So I think you have a nice topic for the lunch.
For the lunch,
Thank you.
And with that, I think we're going to. Okay, so fantastic. It's time for Yi.
No, I think that we have a swap in that program because Olivia is not joining today because she was sick. And then we swap Vanessa. So now we have a Vanessa now, and then after lunch we will listen to that.
Okay, good.
So it's like,
Okay, cool.
we have more space.
Yeah, sounds good.
In their schedule.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, that's not the one I want.
No.
So you're this is tomorrow. This is not today at least.
Yeah, you're after lunch then.
No, I'm tomorrow.
No, you're tomorrow.
Yeah.
Vanda is after lunch. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I was just getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. All good to go.
I think so.
Awesome.
And just use the arrows.
And
like the buttons, yes.
Try not to touch that. And
I
we're
will do
good.
my best. Okay, cool. Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa Ternes. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Leeds working, among others, with Simon Shepherd. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about a project I did over the last 2 years where I tried to map public perceptions around zero-emission vehicles. bit of context, I don't need to tell you that transport is a huge contributor to climate change. I put up a graph here of emissions from the UK over the last few decades from different sectors, where this line is transport emissions. You can see it's reduced a little bit, but it's largely remained constant over the last few decades. But at the same time, the UK wants to be net zero by 2050. So to move from this to net zero in just a few decades we have left, we need a huge transition. A lot needs to change in the transport sector, and that needs new kind of policies as well. And that means these policies need to be successful. And around this, we know that policies tend to be more successful if the public supports them. We also know that the public is more likely to be supportive of policies that they think are fair. And more in general, we know people's perceptions shape the way we act, shape the way we respond to policies. But the big gap in all of this is, what does the public actually think is fair or unfair in the context of transport decarbonisation, which is what I've tried to answer here. And a little bit of theory, because fairness has so many different definitions, so many different views. I try to conceptualize it with the lens of a just transition, which might be a term you've heard more often also in policy spaces. Now, in research, it's often looked at through these three main tenets. So we've got recognition justice, basically, what do we recognize as important? What's the problem? What's the kind of people involved? What are we looking at here? Or what are we not looking at in the first place? Then we've got procedural justice, and that's all about the how. So how are decisions being made? Which knowledge is included? Who gets a say? Who doesn't get a say? And lastly, we've got distribution justice, which focuses on the outcomes. So how are benefits and drawbacks of a policy distributed amongst different people, different places, maybe different points in time as well? We'll get back to this in the discussion. So the case study I chose for this research was the Zero Emission Vehicle Mandate, which is a UK policy that says that, well, at the time I did my data collection, the policy said that by 2030, 80% of new cars, so from the factory to first owner, and 70% of new vans have to be zero-emission vehicle, increasing to 100% by 2035. I mean, since then, a new government is in place. They're looking at changing the numbers of all of this, but at the time I did the research, this is what the policy looked like. And that really illustrates that a transition to zero-emission vehicles is seen as a really important way to decarbonize UK transport. But also we know from previous research that particularly electric vehicles have various recognized negative effects, for example, around affordability. We've already talked about mining a little bit. And more generally, they're still cars, essentially, with all the drawbacks that come from that. So that's a good reason to talk about fairness here. Just a quick note actually on language in my presentation. So the policy itself said zero-emission vehicles, being open to all kinds of different technologies. But in practice, that still means the vast majority of zero-emission vehicles are electric vehicles. And also that applies to people's thoughts and perceptions. So when they think about ZEVs, they often think electric. And therefore, in the presentation and in general in my findings, I try to replicate the language of whoever I speak to. Like, if they're thinking EVs, that's what I'll write down here. So that's why you might see some inconsistencies in the terms I use. So the research question I then asked was, okay, how does the public perceive the fairness implications of this policy of the zero-emission vehicle mandate? And of course, being at a system dynamics conference, I wanted to explore this through a causal loop diagram because I felt that they have some benefits. It's a really good recognized method of gathering data with various different stakeholders, putting it into an accessible format, and comparing that with other existing research in the space. But I noticed there's some drawbacks to this as well, at least to the majority of work I've seen so far, which is that either group model building is done with experts, so that's people who are used to talking about the subject they're being asked about. They may be used to focus group situations or just being in a room and discussing. Or where it's done with like lay people who've not done system dynamics before. Most of the papers I've read required quite a lot of training of the participants, which takes a fair bit of time, which for some people can be a barrier to participate. So I try to really boil down the method to something I can do in a short amount of time, in my case 2 hours, to be able to get a much more wide variety of people into the room. So I've borrowed a few good things, as I said, from causal loop diagrams, but I've also looked at other surrounding methods to understand and map systems with people. For example, participatory systems mapping is a more broad and loose idea of capturing participant views in often very large detailed system maps and then creating sub-maps for further analysis, which is what I've done here as well. And I've done this work with 10 focus groups across Leeds in the UK. And as you can partially see from the map of Leeds already, I've tried to get a lot of variety, both within and amongst the groups. So I've gone through both the city centre and some more rural areas, areas with lower and higher average incomes. I focused in some groups specifically on students, one on people who have caring responsibilities and therefore different travel patterns, one on people who are particularly environmentally conscious because essentially this policy is a climate policy, so maybe these people have different ideas. And then I did a group as well with people who already drive electric vehicles now to see what their thoughts are as essentially early adopters on this. And then within these groups, I try to go for a big spread of different ages, both people who drive and who currently don't drive, and so on. For the structure of the focus group, so I started with just very briefly introducing the policy, same amount of detail as I've given you right now, because I didn't want to educate people, but I wanted to understand what's already there, what they're already thinking of anyway. So I kept it at sort of news headline level of detail. And then I asked, okay, how will this influence your lives? What are your hopes for the policy? What might improve? What are your concerns? What might maybe be not so good about it? So some of you would recognize, sounds like a hopes and fears exercise. It is. I've just renamed it hopes and concerns because when I did test runs, I found that talking about fears gave people, they were less comfortable with it. And some people I tested this with said that it's not the kind of language that describes their experience as well. And then at first people made these notes just for themselves on paper, so they had some time to think it through. They wouldn't be put on the spot to talk right away. And then from the variables they've written down, I've collected them all on Post-its to see what the clusters are, which different themes came up. For example, if multiple people wrote down, oh, air quality is a factor here, that would be put together into one cluster. And then we've been drawing basically a big mind map of people's ideas, starting in the middle with the zero emission vehicle mandate. And then I would say, okay, some of you have written down this topic. Who wants to explain how this connects here? And that's essentially as much probing as I tried to do. I reminded people of the notes they made, but beyond that, I really just tried to capture the things they're telling me. And then afterwards, I developed this into a proper causal loop diagram, applying the full methodology. So in the focus groups itself, as you can see, the variables were all directional, because that's just much more closely related to how people tend to think and speak in their daily lives. So capturing in that way meant there was less of a cognitive barrier for people. They could just go with the flow of the conversation. And also, the zero emission vehicle mandate is kind of introduced, so there is a direction to it anyway. So keeping the rest of the variables sort of directional worked for the conversation as well. And then afterwards, I sat down, converted it to proper causal loop diagrams, effectively removing the direction from the variable names, putting it onto the arrows. That gave me 10 causal loop diagrams from the focus groups, and then I did some coding in the social science sense. So effectively looking at, okay, this part of the diagram talks about this theme, here they talk about this theme, here they talk about this. Found a large list of 38, I think, different themes that came up. I've just put up the ones that had more than 10 references here. And what I noticed there was that there was several of these codes that often occurred together. So like neighboring areas of the causal loop diagrams would always be coded with similar codes, like one feeding into each other or drawing from each other. So this led me to identify these 4 key themes. actually, I should add, there was a fifth key theme around sort of climate change and air quality, but there, like that one mapped very closely onto things we already know about the policy, and there wasn't as much in terms of the fairness implications, which is what I wanted to focus on in my research. So here I'm focusing on these four, which is privilege, charging practices, car ownership choices in public transport. And what I should also add, what I also did with these codes was I also applied them to the policy documents themselves, because I wanted to see to what extent the thoughts of the public were actually reflected in the policy documents. And then, based on that, I've built some thematic causal loop diagrams to be able to compare. I'm going to show you just one of them. I'll save the complaining for lunch, don't worry. So this is the theme of privilege that I identified. And this is the sort of central feedback loop in there, where people said that, okay, if you have more disposable income, you have more money, you're more able to afford an electric vehicle. If more people afford electric vehicles, more of them make a switch, there's more EVs in the fleet. If there's more EVs in the fleet, on average, they're cheaper to charge than it is to put petrol or diesel in a car. So on average, the mileage costs decrease, which means there's more money available again for other things, which, like, more money available sounds quite nice. But one of my participants gave me this fantastic quote of, "It's fair once you're in it." Basically meaning to say that, well, yeah, once you're part of this feedback loop, it's great, you get the benefits. But not everybody is actually able to be part of this in the first place. Not everybody has the savings or the disposable income needed to buy an electric car. And that kind of idea really carried on through all the conversations where people called this, for example, it's a middle class policy or it's a policy for rich people was the kind of language that was used. And that, of course, affects people's attitudes towards the policy. If they think, oh, it's for rich people, but they don't think themselves as a rich person, they will not even consider whether or not an electric car makes sense for them. And also, this kind of feedback loop actually fits into very different other contexts. So let's cut off a bit. The top one is the context from the government documents, where the government essentially said, well, yeah, if there's more EVs in the fleet, eventually the second-hand market will increase. Second-hand market cars are a bit cheaper, so maybe more people can then afford to buy an EV, and overall there'll be more electric vehicles happening. Whereas, in contrast, the public perception was more around sort of challenges surrounding this kind of feedback loop. For example, they felt that, well, the upfront costs are high, we need incentives here now to help us. They didn't really consider the second-hand market much, they felt like it needed different methods. Another maybe interesting comparison, oh, I did highlight this, that's cool, is that the government documents contained another benefit, which they recognized as, if people drive more, then they can access more different places where they can get all kinds of benefits, socializing, working, education, you name it. And that's more accessible if the mileage costs are lower. So driving's cheaper, people drive more. Again, only applies for those who actually have an electric car. Another interesting difference I wanted to point out was the role of job perks. So all the kind of extra incentives that your employer might give you. And there it came up both in the government documents and also in the focus group discussions, but in a different context. Again, the government that said, well, job perks are available for the public, sort of grouping everyone together into one unit. Whereas again, my focus group participants really differentiated between, okay, some people have the kind of jobs where these benefits, say, like free charging at work, getting a company car, a few other schemes as well, where they're available. Other people either don't have the kind of job where it's available, or they currently don't have a job at all. Say you're on maternity leave, say you're retired, maybe you're still a student. So again, they felt there was some inequality there that didn't feel right to them. I've already briefly mentioned the different kinds of ways people want to be able to access this really nice feedback loop, where the government said, well, second-hand market is going to sort this out for us. whereas the participants, members of the public, really wanted to look more at, well, incentives and other ways of reducing the barrier of cost. And then lastly, interestingly, the focus group participants also talked a lot about, okay, what happens if there's more electric vehicles in the fleet? What's the consequences of that? And there was a few, let's say, quite specific worries, but worries that people really strongly pointed out in the conversations. For example, some told me that if there's more EVs, there's fewer cars paying petrol tax. Does that mean the government will increase petrol tax to still get the same amount of income from it? The answer is not clear, but it's certainly something that people worried about. And also, I've just summed it up as externalities from car travel in general. Lots of people pointed out that, yeah, it's still a car policy. We're still driving cars. And themes like active travel, public transport came up quite organically across all the conversations, even without any kind of prompting. So I'll quickly summarize what I found around the other themes as well. So there was a big chunk around charging practices. So it's basically your daily routines, your habits, how you engage with your car, how you fuel it up or charge it up, which was by participants seen as actually quite a change to how they do it right now, as opposed to sometimes driving to a petrol station. There's this like thing they have to remember every day. It's quite a chore. It maybe takes new knowledge. It felt complicated. It felt stressful. So they really felt that there's a big transition to their everyday lives, which I didn't see mentioned in the policy documents at all. There, the assumption was rather that, like, well, people drive places anyway. There will be a charger. They can just plug in and go, which in many, many places is far from how the actual network looks like. People also talked about the kind of different choices they make around car ownership. As I said, the government puts a lot of emphasis on the second-hand market. For my research participants, that was just one of multiple options. They also talked a lot about either keeping their current petrol or diesel car for a lot longer than they would have otherwise, which will have implications on sort of the future of repairs for these cars, providing fuel, and so on. Or they talked about just, well, giving up driving altogether, having to switch to public transport, which might bring some benefits, but might also be challenging in places where public transport just isn't good yet. And more generally around public transport, people had both hopes that if more people use public transport, it's going to improve, it's going to attract investments. But they also worried that this focus on electric vehicles or zero-emission vehicles generally might take away policy attention and funding and so on from public transports. So thoughts in both directions. I'm going to be very quick in trying to bring this back to just transitions. In terms of recognition, government policy really focused on consumers. That's the language they used. So the people who will eventually buy a car. Whereas my focus group participants talked about everyone who somehow participates in the transport system, whether or not that is inside a car. And also they focused a lot more on the transition process, whereas the government looked at a sort of future outcome where the big switch in society has been made already. In terms of procedural justice, there was a lot of conversation around how people didn't feel considered by the policy. And for example, it was illustrated in what I said about charging earlier. People felt that the policy didn't understand their needs of how they use their car, how they charge their car, even where they live and how far away the next charger currently is. And I think that in part at least comes from a lack of public engagement on the policy. Like the government really saw it as a technical question of which percentage of ZEVs should we mandate by which year? And I didn't see any evidence of direct engagement with the public around what are we going to do with electric cars. And then lastly, in terms of distribution, the government looked at it from a sort of, well, the public, one unit, will adopt electric cars, whereas in the public conversations, they were a lot more detailed in pointing out the kinds of people who will benefit from it, the kinds of people who are unable to access the benefits, and even the kind of people who might be particularly at a disadvantage from the policy, whether that's for example, safety worries that came up, cost, and so on, effects on public transport. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Vanessa. Questions? Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. It's very interesting. Just thinking with your focus group, I think it's a bit too wise or targeted because when we just transition, so what about the society or community that is going to be destabilized as a result of adopting EVs, right? So, for example, if you were to ask a person who is having vested interest or income coming from the incumbent conventional vehicles, so that you would come up with a different kind of mindset, with a different loops. So look, I'm going to adopt EV, there's going to be more EVs, and eventually I'm going to be out of the job and I'm not going to have an income. So, I mean, you would ending up with a different kind of cognitive, the cognitive justice.
Yeah.
So I mean, your results would be a bit different because with just transition, we usually do not look at the destabilized industry parts with those who are going to be out of markets, and so if you could reflect upon that.
Yeah, I've got two parts of an answer to that. The first one's just a bit of detail about how I recruited people, which is I kept my recruitment message very general, saying I want to talk about transport policies and sustainability. I didn't mention cars at all in my recruitment materials because I didn't just want the car enthusiasts in the room, but sort of a good section of everyone. And then before people participated, I had them do like a pre-screening survey. So from everyone interested in a particular focus group, I could make sure I had a good balance from not just drivers, but also people who sometimes access a car, people who don't have a car at all. So I tried to mitigate it in that way. And some themes around sort of industry effects still came up in the conversations, especially there from people who had smaller businesses. The sort of tradesperson with a van, for example, saying that for them, they feel like an electric van just isn't going to work in their daily routines in the same way. Also some themes around like the kind of repairs needed on electric cars, which people perceive to be a lot more complex. So maybe fewer businesses would be able to do the repairs, maybe repair people would be out of a job in the future. So there's been some touching up upon that, but yeah, it'd be really interesting to then, as a next step, compare it with other literature, or maybe even with existing system dynamics models that look a bit more closely on these like industry impacts. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's very inspiring, indeed, for my next paper.
Cool.
And therefore, I also have a question related to how you translated these focus group models to proper system dynamics.
Yeah, should I just go back a few slides?
So, did you experience any challenges, difficulties in doing it, or what were, like maybe you had to add some variables or change something? Like how was it basically? How difficult was it to do this?
So I'd say the first step of going from the mind map to the causal loop diagram was quite straightforward. But I think that's in part because I already had planned to do that. So in the way I asked questions about, okay, you asked this, what happens next? Does this connect to anything else in the diagram? I was already able to capture it in this way. I'd say, however, the next step of then getting to the thematic diagrams was a bit more challenging. And that's because in this step, I stuck as close as possible to the language of the participants. For example, one group talked about pollution, another said air quality, another said fumes, another said emissions. And if that's the language they used to think about it, that's what I wanted to capture in the first place. But then later on, making these kind of judgments of which things mean a similar thing here and which things maybe refer to different kind of topics, that was a bit more challenging. So of going back to all the notes I made as well, sometimes even going back to the recordings of the focus groups to see what the context was in which something was said. So, a bit of a multi-step process there.
So that's how you dealt with it, by looking at the context and
exactly.
basically what it means. Do you have any scripts of this? Any script, like a scriptopedia of how you proceeded? The different steps that you took to...
Well, it's somewhere in my thesis, but not in a format that I can currently put up on here.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm happy to dig it out for you and send it to you.
Thanks.
Yes, who's first? Do you want to go first?
Yes, a similar question related to the method that you conducted. you did the thematic coding, right?
Yeah.
And then you calculate the frequency of the codes. How did you use that frequency in your modeling? You assign any specific way, or I mean, how those frequencies inform the model later on?
Yeah, so because my sample size was quite small, of only 10 focus groups, I felt like that's too small to do any kind of statistic analysis with this. So I used it in a more loose way of, if a code has a very high frequency and also occurs across many of the different focus groups, then it's going to be much more important than a code that has a lower frequency. And I think in practice what it looked like, as I said, I built these themes. They always draw from multiple of these codes. And what I wanted to aim for was that every code that's, I don't exactly remember which my threshold was, but I sort of set a threshold of frequency. And every code that's, I think, mentioned in at least half of the focus groups should be reflected into one of these key themes. Because that's the things that were really frequent conversations across the different groups. Whereas if a code was mentioned only in a few groups, or maybe only in one group, then it might be less important to the overall conversation. So more of like a validation to say, okay, the themes I found, they do sort of cover the broad conversations. But yeah, I didn't do statistics on it. Astrid, you had a question as well?
Yeah, if nobody else has, we have time, because I have plenty of time later.
Yes.
Just one which might be interesting for others doing group model building. I notice when I do group model building, I'm a rubbish modeler. Because I like to discuss with the content. So did you have any training? Were you alone? Did you have kind of a partner, moderator, neutral person, or how did you perceive this to work?
Yeah, great question, because I spent a lot of time thinking about that as well. So first of all, preparation. I ran a few different test groups of this with just colleagues from across the university to see how they respond. And for example, the switching hopes and fears to hopes and concerns came out of that. Then in the focus groups themselves, I had one person who was taking notes as we went along. And that was really helpful to, in hindsight, understand which themes came up at which part of the conversation, which is actually something I'm currently digging into a bit more deeply. And then I was doing the sort of capturing information and drawing out the big mind map in the middle of this. But I also had some specific facilitation training, because I wanted to be sure that I respond to everyone with the same kind of, I guess, neutral curiosity is a good way to phrase it. Like, I didn't want to give them content beyond what they've already written down. I didn't want to probe them in a certain way. I just wanted to ask them, like, okay, what do you think is going to happen? And also I wanted to be able as a facilitator to give everyone the same kind of room to speak. So I prepared myself also to be able to deal like with really quiet participants, or with the ones who will talk over everyone because they have a really important story to tell. So I tried to be a balanced facilitator in inviting people to speak rather than giving anything into the conversation myself.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Can I have 30 seconds?
Yeah.
To be super cheeky,
Yeah.
but question to the room, which maybe someone can answer to me over lunch. I'm just going to get a causal loop diagram up. I'm still working on sort of qualitatively coding causal loop diagrams. The kind of thing of, okay, this part of the diagram says this part of the diagram says this. I've not yet found the perfect software to actually do this. So if anyone has software insights, please talk to me over lunch. You're going to make my life a lot easier. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think we thank Vanessa with that.
Thank you.
So great, thanks. I think we're at lunch now.
Yes.
Yeah, and there should be lunch outside. Yeah, and when
We start at 1:30.
1:30, we start again, so we have plenty of time. And yeah, if you want to go out for a walk or a bit of air, and so please do that. And yeah, you know how to get through the door if you need that again. So
Text in the group or just call us.
yeah, so enjoy lunch.
No. Nice to meet you.